Okay, recording. So you'll screenshot whichever one you're interested in, and then you will just bring it into Illustrator, and the document size that you want is the 11 by 17 because that's going to be the size of your print. Okay, so you'll bring this in. I think it was this one. Oops, sorry. All right, so it's probably going to be really pixelated. You can go ahead and size it up if you'd want, okay? So what we want to first take a look at is this base, right? Because how this works is like it's a base and then this little cupcake topper just sits on top, okay? So that's how you would open it and close it so that it's like a box for your buttons, okay? So the main thing that we want to keep in mind is that we want to make sure that this will be big enough to fit a button. Okay, so our buttons are 2.25, so I would say, make sure that this is at least 2.5, okay? And then the way that this works is that we have notice how we have a couple different lines, okay? Any of your flat lines are going to be cuts. Any of your dotted lines are going to be scores, okay? So your dotted lines are where you're going to fold, and your straight lines are where we're going to cut, okay? And then notice here we have these tabs. This is what actually fits together. So like these tabs will be glued to the inside of this piece, okay? So that's how it will all fit together. Does that make sense to everyone so far? Okay, so really all you're gonna do is you're just gonna trace this. So the first thing that I'll do is maybe I just wanna grab a polygon tool. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sides. So let me start that over again. All right, so I'm going to hold down Shift, drag, and then use my arrow keys here. I think that looks right. Is there one more? No, I think it was this one. Okay, so use my arrow keys, and I can move this into position. Okay, and you can alter this too. Like maybe you only want to do a cupcake that has, this many sides instead of however many sides this has here. So I'm just going to go with a cupcake that has this many sides, just to show you how you could change it based on a plan. Okay, so the first thing that I'll do is I want to make sure that this is the right size. Okay, so this is the width of this is 2.25. So I just want to make sure that it's about 2.5. Okay, so that I can just stack a bunch of buttons in it. All right. And each of the buttons is, let's say, 1/4 inch tall. So if you have 6 buttons, you need to just make sure that this is at least like 3 inches tall. Does that make sense to everybody? Like, so whatever your material is you want to put in the box, which is the buttons, you just got to make sure that like the square inches of them will fit in the box. Does that make sense? Like, it doesn't have to be anything scientific. Just use your common sense. Like, the question is, will this fit 6 buttons? Okay, that's all you have to, that's the question you have to answer, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and just make sure that this is big enough. And then just following this template, I'm gonna start to build this up, okay? So it really doesn't matter what size you wanna make this. We can just kind of follow this template, all right? So I'm gonna leave this here. I'm gonna lock it. All right, and then from here, I'm going to start to make these shapes, okay? So I'm first just going to draw a rectangle, okay? And then what I'm going to do is I will just kind of move 2 of the points in so that I get the right angle, and then I'll just continue to copy and paste this. So I'm just going to make up some kind of arbitrary rules for myself. I'm going to say, let's move this in like 10 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And let's do the same here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. And then I'm going to rotate this so that it has the same orientation as... I'm going to change this color so you guys can see what I'm doing here. Okay. So I'll zoom in. Let me unlock this. Okay, just so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to rotate this guy to where, it's like perpendicular to this other line, and you can just eyeball this. None of this has to be perfect, okay? And then I'll just rescale it so that the length of this shape and this shape here, this line and this line, is the same. So I'll scale that. All right, cool. So that's lined up. That's almost perfect. All right, great. Okay, and then, you know, if you want to make this smaller, go ahead and do so. You can just drag this down, make it a bit smaller, or you can make it larger. Whatever you want to do. I'm going to make mine just a bit smaller here. And I'm just kind of eyeballing it so that it stays even. You know, for instance, you wouldn't want to like move it over here, right? I'm just eyeballing both lines on either side so that they're like equally distant from the other shape. So I'll go here. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and just put a another point, maybe right in the center here. And I'll drag this up. And again, I'm just kind of eyeballing the middle. None of this has to be completely perfect. It should be close, but it doesn't have to be completely perfect, okay? That's what's important to keep in mind. Then I'll drag this down. Okay, so I have my basic shapes pretty much. Maybe I want to move these over a bit. Maybe I want to resize it just a little bit, you know. Just make sure that it kind of stays in place. Drag this up. Okay, so that's going to be like your basic template. You can make these bigger if you'd like. We can add more points to it. You know, whatever you want to do. I'm going to lock this. Why can't I not grab this? All right. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So then what you're going to do is you're going to just start to copy and paste these. So Command C, Command V. I'll place this one here, rotate it so that it aligns perpendicular to that other line. Okay, and you'll keep going like that. Okay, so I'll copy this pair, go over here, rotate this. All right, and I'm just doing like a kind of quick sloppy job so I can show you guys what's happening. And then I have 4 more, so I'm gonna go ahead and just use this same group here. You know, definitely be copy and pasting things so you don't have to do this again. And I'll do the same thing where I just align this perpendicular to that other line. All right, cool. So now I pretty much have the basic shapes. Let's just turn this into an outline so you can see what I'm doing. All right. Then I'll hide this. Interesting. Okay, so here's my basic shapes, okay? So what I need to think about now is I need to think about like, okay, what's going to be a cut and what's going to be a dash line, okay? So once you've kind of drawn out your basic shape like this, you may want to just go ahead and you could copy and paste lines, you can retrace this, because what we're going to need here is all these top lines are going to have to be solid lines, and all these middle lines are going to have to be dotted lines, because that's where we're going to fold them here. Additionally, pretty much everything on this shape is going to have to be a dotted line too, because I want to add little tabs here, okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and just turn this into a dash line. I can control my dash line here, okay? And then I'll have to add some tabs. The tabs we can just draw. The specific shape of them doesn't really even matter because they're going to be hidden as long as they don't overlap each other. And this one we don't want dash lines. So you can kind of just go around and make this like just any old shape that you want, and this could all be one shape. The thing that's really important to keep in mind about this process is that you don't want overlapping shapes, okay? because this isn't how we've been like doing things where, you know, we're doing a shadow with a shape behind something. This is a different, this is kind of a different process, because what's happening here is we're actually cutting it, okay? The computer is only reading, even if you have a fill on something, the computer is only going to be reading whether it's a dotted line or a solid line. So for instance, if I have two shapes like this, and they both have, you know, a white fill, and let's say, you know, I want to cut out this shape and then this shape, right? What's actually going to happen if you go up to view outline, it'll show you exactly what the computer's going to see, okay? So let me change this to another color so you can see what I'm talking about, okay? So it's going to show you exactly what the computer and the digital cutter is going to see. So if I go to view outline, it's actually going to cut everything here. Does that make sense to everybody? So it's actually cutting the vector outline shapes. It doesn't care about your stroke width or your fill or anything like that. And if you're confused about what it's going to cut, you can go ahead and just go to view preview or outline, okay? And that'll show you exactly. So even if you want to work in this function, that would be fine as well, okay? Don't worry about if your outlines aren't showing up in this mode. Don't worry about that right now. We do have to change them in the program, but as long as it's just a separate shape, like for instance, you wouldn't want this shape and this shape to be the same, because this one you want to be dotted, this one you want to be cut, okay? So we'll change that in the program. So here's where the tricky part is, okay? You may want to just go through this and maybe copy and paste one line and change it to a dotted line, because right now what we have is we have two lines overlapping on each other. So here we actually have two different lines here, okay? And so what would happen is we'd cut it twice. That's not what we want. We just want a solid dotted line. So one of the things that you could do is you could go through here and, you know, add separate points to lines and delete them, right? So I selected that one, and maybe I'll go through here, add a point here, delete it, and then I could go back in and maybe lock this, Command 2, and then add, you know, a separate line from this point to this point that then is dotted. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? So really, it's just like a lot of construction. It's just like changing the way you think about the vectors a little bit, right? So don't think of them as like, this is a shape that I'm using to render out an image. Think of it as like, this is a shape that I'm using to render out a three-dimensional object. Does that make sense? Is anyone very confused about this process? Long story short, the most important thing that you need to keep in mind is that any line that you have, they need to be separate, okay? So just think like, okay, all of these are going to be cut out, so I want this to all have a solid line. So you may just want to lock it once you figure out like your version, and then trace over it, okay? And then to get your individual lines here, you may just want to get rid of the solid lines and then just replace it with a new one. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so this is hard. It is complex. That's why you have like the whole day and then homework to work on it as well, okay? If you're confused, pick something really simple. There's a ton of great examples on here. You know, this is a really advanced one. But if you're confused, like some of these are really, really simple. Like this one's incredibly simple, okay? You know, what I would recommend is maybe you want to draw all the shapes that are solid lines first, and then go back through and add the dotted lines, okay? If you're confused, just do something that's really, really simple. Just make sure that it's scaled big enough to fit your buttons, okay? Okay, I'm going to stop this